Hey, this is Donald Grodoff with Focused Healthy Family, and this is podcast number 173. And today we're doing something a little different. Usually we start the podcast out with this story. What we're going to do today is we're going to flip it around and we're going to play some of the stories that we've gotten over time. We've got a little break in our action today, so it's just me, but I want to put this out there. And like I say, just going to play some of the stories we've heard. A couple of them are actually come from my previous Invisible Wheelchair podcast, but most of them are coming from our podcast today. So instead of starting it out, we're going to just leap into the different stories that we've gotten through the time. Our first one is with Amy Lang with talking about sex. And it's a little bit controversial. It came from my Invisible Wheelchair podcast, but it just really she's just a very energetic person. I just thought it would be fun to start out her story that she gave me with the Invisible podcast and let you kind of just listen to it. Nothing too controversial with this, but just listen.
People are always really curious about how I started doing this work because I don't have a typical job. And so I was a sexual health educator all through my 20s and into my 30s. I was doing birth control, pregnancy counseling, STI counseling, had talked to all different kinds of people, totally loved it. It was my hobby. And I had assumed that when I had kids that I would just be a rock star at the sex talks. And when my son, Milo, who's 19 now, was about 4 or 5, he was getting ready for a bath and he grabbed his penis and he said, "Hey, Mama, did you know?" And I stood there and I looked at him and I thought, oh, God, please don't tell me it feels good to touch your penis because I've got nothing. So I'm standing there and I did that, that parenting thing where you have like a poker face. I'm like super calm. And I said, "What?" And he said, "I can see the veins in there where the blood goes." And I said, "Great, get in the bathtub." And, that was the moment where I was like, excellent. Like I am totally unprepared for this. I know that's true. I know about penises. Like I've been around one or two in my life. And so I was like, oh God, you've got to figure this out. So I started doing some research and just trying to figure out like, when should we start the conversations with kids? And is it okay? Like, what do I tell a 5-year-old? Like, how do we do this? And while I was doing that research, I learned a ton. And I also have a master's degree and my focus was in adult education. So I just combined my two favorite things, teaching adults and talking about sex. And so here we are 15 years later.
Number 2 is Adam Salzman with Adventure EXP. And to calm it down a little bit, he's talking about his father and the joy of his father. So I thought I'd relay that.
Woke up this morning thinking about my grandpa, who, even though he died more than 6 years ago, he continues to be one of the most consistent sources of inspiration for me. And many of my extended family feels the same way. And the specific memory that for some reason I woke up thinking about was there was one time many years ago that until my grandpa passed away right before his 99th birthday, he was in exceptional health, except for his hearing wasn't so great. And that meant, a lot of times plans happened around him without him being involved in those plans. So there was one time that my mom had organized, her kids and my cousins and her siblings and their spouses to come over to my grandparents' house and like just to have like a pizza dinner kind of thing. So she shows up at my grandparents first and she walks in with all these boxes of pizza. And my grandpa's like, "What are you doing with all that? We're never going to eat all of that." She's like, "We're just going to eat it and then we'll freeze it, whatever." And, unbeknownst to him, there were 15 or 20 people that were planning to come over. So then, a few minutes pass and my cousin walks in and he's like, "Margot, so great to see you. Are you hungry?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm starving, Grandpa." And he's like, "Oh, check out all this pizza. Have some of this pizza." And then my brother and his girlfriend walk in and he goes, "Alex, Elise, amazing to see you. Are you hungry?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're starving." And this goes on time and time again. And I just think about this, there's not so much meaning that I derive from that, but just how wonderful it is that family shows up for each other. and just, something about ignorance being bliss. And my grandpa was able to like share all this joy and with his family that, of course, originally he argued against, but then he was so grateful that it all happened. He was like, miraculously, all this pizza's here because 25 of my family members are here. So anyways, this morning I woke up thinking about that story and wanted to share it.
Number 3 is Teepa Snow with Positive Approach to Aging. And she talks a little bit about how she got into it in her role as a occupational therapist with her approach on things.
And so we found out that she was terminal. I mean, the cancer had spread too much. And they thought she had a very short window of time to live. And she asked her son, her one son, I really want to go home to die. And he was, no, Mom, I'm not doing it. It's too risky. I don't feel okay doing this. And it was like, so I advocated for, I said, well, maybe if we could, we could work on some things and she could do it. And he was like, absolutely not. And I watched this woman like collapse into a space of why bother then if I'm never going to get to go home again. And I will say he was a good son, but he wasn't a skilled son. And so I finally one night, as I'm like really struggling with this, because I really thought she should have the right to go home, but it wasn't mine to call. And she still had the house because he hadn't sold the house yet, but he was going to sell the house as soon as she died. And he'd already shared that with her. That he was going to sell the house after she died. And sort of like, like I said, he wasn't really skilled. He was really careful because he really didn't want her going home. He wanted her safe. And the thing was, he had a hard time believing that she wasn't actually a whole lot safer in the facility than she would have been at home. She'd already had another fracture. And so sure enough, I sort of get my nerve up to say, I really think if I went with her and we did a home visit, how about if we just did a home visit to see what it would take? And he finally got to work. Fine, you can take her. I'm not taking her. I'm not going to be there. I can't stand this. And I was like, okay. So the day we were going to do the home visit, she fell out of bed and broke her hip again. It was like, oh no, oh no. And that's when my brain woke up and I realized, wait a minute. This was back in the day. I said, oh, how about, could we make a video walking through her house? Can we make a video? Can we do a video of walking through the house, room by room, all that, you pan around? And he said, well, yeah, I can do that. So he did that. We brought it in and we played the video. And she said, oh, that's where I keep this. This is where this happens. This is that. And so one of the very last times that he saw her and I was there, she was going home. And she got to go home because I was willing to let go of what I thought she wanted, to realize what she really needed was a way to go home. And it didn't mean physically go home, but to really revisit the place that she had lived her life, raised her children, her son, she only had the one, and make things complete, because she needed to go back to that place. And as soon as she was back, boy, did she light up. And then she was very appreciative of getting to go home, both to her son and to me. And it made her so comfortable that her passing was super quiet because she had what she needed.
Number 4 is Richard London. And Richard is a speaker, author. He's written different books, but he talks about Parkinson's. But he really starts the story out, this one pretty recently, but he started the story out with a really kind of curious, fun story. So I thought I'd play that one.
I want to ask you a question. Are you more like a skunk or a squirrel? Let me explain. I recently read a story about a farmer who was having a squirrel problem. So he set out catch and release traps. One day he heard a noise. Bam! The trap caught a squirrel. The squirrel was running around the inside of the trap, bouncing back and forth, literally driving himself nuts. The next day he heard a noise again. Bam! This time the trap caught a skunk. What the skunk did was he walked around the perimeter of the inside of the trap, checking it out, walked back to the food that lured him there, had his lunch, started cleaning himself, grooming, licking his paws and his face, reached outside through the trap, pulled in sticks and twigs, and took a nap. So my question to you is, the next time you face challenges in your life, are you going to be more like a skunk or a squirrel? My advice is that we should all be more like the skunk and learn how to make the best out of our bad situations.
Number 5 is Anthony Cirillo. He's a music person. It's called Sage. He plays music for senior centers and senior places. And I love his story about Esther. I thought it was really fun to talk about Esther.
Hi there. I'd like to tell you a story. It's called The Story of Esther. I am a Philadelphia native and was working in hospitals and also a gigging musician full-time at night. And when I got out of that, I started going into assisted living and nursing homes and singing for folks. And it changed the trajectory of my healthcare life. And so when we came down to the Charlotte, North Carolina area 22 years ago, I started doing some singing locally and up in as far as Hickory and down to Spartanburg. And I met Esther, and I call her my designated heckler because I have strange programs every month. Like in November, everything has a theme, and sometimes it's obvious, like you're going to do patriotic songs on Veterans Day or something like that. But though in November, I do Pennies from Heaven. And, Esther would look at me strange, like, what the heck does this have anything to do with November? I said, well, come on, Esther. It's National Accountants Day in November. So we became fast friends over time. And one day after I was done a performance, she asked the activity director to have me come to the hospital and visit her. Well, that came out of left field, but I went because, Esther and I were kind of buddies by then. And so she said, on the way over, she goes, yeah, by the way, Esther died and was revived. She's in the coronary care unit. She wants you. I said, okay. So we got to the hospital and Esther's there. Her daughter's there. And Esther's flirting with me, much to the embarrassment of her daughter. They say, Mom, he's a married man. Esther wanted me to sing to her, but she wanted a particular song. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Beautiful song, right? One problem. I didn't know it. And I told her, Esther, I'm from Philadelphia. We do, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, the Great American Songbook. I said, I come down the stairs every day, from upstairs in South Philly. And, when I was a kid and, we had a picture of the Lord on one wall. And we had a picture of Frank Sinatra on the other. And we bowed to Frank every day. So anyway, I sang Unforgettable because that's what she was. But I said, I'm going to learn that song for you, Esther. And I did. And I put it on a little CD, 3.5-minute song, one CD, send it to the assisted living in Hickory. And she was back there. And so I thought all was good with the world. And then the activity director let me know that she was in hospice a few weeks later. And then a few weeks later, she had passed. And I don't normally go to the funerals of residents who I sing for because that's the thing that can keep you quite busy, right? But I went to Esther's funeral. And on the program, of course, the song was Because He Lives. But before the program started, the daughter came up to me and she started crying. And they had said that she had not cried at all until she saw me. And so she came up to me, hugged me. She said, did you hear about my mother's last day of life? I said, no. I said, well, on her last day, we played your CD over and over again until finally I knelt down next to Mom and I started singing with her and telling her to let go. And Mom died that day. And so that's my story of Esther, because here's the thing. There's a lot of times just from being a capitalist, profitable enterprise, I could have stayed in the hospital field and made a lot more money. But every time I try to pull away from it, like with what I'm doing now with music, I can't because, I have a card from Esther sitting on my desk here and a picture of Esther somewhere close by as well. And Esther's been gone a lot of years. And I still converse with her daughter and granddaughter on Facebook. So if you're looking for purpose in life, including a caregiving, which is a purpose, that's how I found mine. I didn't get into the aging space necessarily because my mother had a situation that came much later. I got into it and cemented it because of Esther.
Number 6 is Bert Freeman. And Bert is a old friend of mine from way back. Like I say, this is from the Invisible Wheelchair podcast, but he talks about positive direction. But he tells this story about how he grew up and somebody that was mentoring to him, and I thought it was really cool. So I thought I'd put that on.
But that question has me thinking about back when I was younger, a lot younger than I am now.
We won't go to age here.
That's right. But I lived in Philadelphia, in Germantown, which is a part of Philadelphia at that time. And we lived on a city street, and we lived in the city. I had a brother and a foster sister and our parents. And I remember oftentimes our next door neighbor was an older woman. She was, and I used to, when I referred to her as the old lady, but that's more in terms of affection more than anything else. And we lived in a duplex, and there was a wooden rail between these two houses in this duplex. And often, at some point in my life, and in my teenage years, she would always, it was almost like she took me under her wing, and she would talk to me about different things. And and there was this flow of wisdom that was coming to me. Now, whether I grasped it, I'm still wondering about that.
Yeah.
But there was this flow of wisdom that came, and she would tell me stories about different things, and it was like sitting at the foot of the guru, so to speak. And that was the experience I had with her for a number of years in my teenage years, probably from the age of 15 to 18. It's different than it was anything planned. It's just that, when we just so happened to be there, then she would just talk to me and say things to me that really helped me from a standpoint of understanding a little bit more about myself, but also understanding about ways to approach people.
And finally, I just thought I'd repeat the story I did about my dad. I find it a fascinating story about how he was there for me when I was in surgery. And I thought I'd leave you with this as the end of the podcast. So I had surgery in 2019, open heart surgery. Not a fun surgery to go through, by the way. And we went to, initially, when I started feeling that, I felt a little uncomfortable and some numbness going across my shoulders.
After you had a heart attack 8 years prior.
That's right. In 2011, I had my heart attack and had stints at that time. But in 2019, like I said, I felt a little odd and some numbness. And, of course, you were always good at immediately taking me somewhere to just check it out. And so we went about 5 minutes from our house to a smaller hospital.
That they built just for us because it wasn't.
Of course, yeah.
Heart attack.
And at that hospital, of course, I stayed 2 nights.
Couple nights.
Yeah. Where they did evaluation. They figured out I had some more blockage that needed to be taken care of. And so had one room there. And in that room, you get, I use the fact.
Was it that hospital that you had that? I thought it was.
No, just bear with me here. When we're in when you're in a hospital room like that, you get all the bucket and the pail with the water and all the yes. And on that in that room, all my stuff was marked Grodoff D, which is our last name is Grodoff, and mine is, of course, is Don. So I had to go down to the main hospital downtown.
Same hospital system.
So yeah, thank you. And in first room I went into, all my stuff was marked properly with Grodoff D, all the buckets and all that. Went through the surgery, and then I went through a 24-hour recovery room, which didn't have all that stuff in it. Just it was a group room with a bunch of people in it, which was interesting to be in. And then moved to a final room, which was my final recovery room. And in that particular room, all my toiletry items, the buckets and all that, they were marked with Grodoff H. Now I looked at it and was kind of confused about it when I was in there, but I was kind of in a rough place, I guess. They're not pay, but I did ask him at the time. I said, "Am I registered correctly here?" And she looked it up and she said, "No, you're registered under Don." And she looked at those stuff and she said, "I don't know how that happened. I don't know." So it didn't really, again, it did not dawn on me at the time, but when we were coming home, I remember you were carrying the bucket with some stuff inside of it. And as you walked through the door, you went, "Oh my God, Don, your dad was there." And I I looked at the bucket. My dad's name was Harold, and it had Grodoff H. And I remember starting to cry and just being kind of awed by it, because my dad died on preparation for the same surgery back in 1976. So, and of course, surgeries back then weren't I don't think as well developed as they were now. Yeah, I didn't have it. He was in, like I say, in prep for it when he passed away. And that just kind of sent some shockwaves through me, I guess, in a way, because you said he was there helping me out, which I believe wholeheartedly that's what happened. He was watching over it to make sure I made it through that surgery that he didn't have the chance to. And we also joked, of course, when they do that surgery, they cut down and split my ribs open. I mean, the stuff they do to me, I was glad I was out for it, because it wasn't. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and the really tough part of it, that waking up from that surgery was probably the hardest part of it, because I remember telling the nurse, and I told the doctor, my last memory of my father was with him having that intubator stuck in his mouth, like I say, in preparation. They were trying to work with him, and him trying to mouth to us that he loved us. So that's our podcast for today. I hope you enjoyed these stories. They're kind of fun stories here and there that we gather as we do this podcast. If whatever platform you're on, if you can leave us a comment, we'd love to know more about what you'd like to hear. And if you have a story that you want to tell, if you want to get on the podcast, or somebody that's a therapist that's part of this, that wants to share their story, whether it's about working or about part of dealing with their aging loved one, please let us know. We'd love that kind of information. If you can, like our podcast, you can always check out what Gina and I do in helping people through their journey of their aging parent. Gina's been in this business for 30 plus years. She can consult with you, can sit down with you and kind of talk through what's going on for you and how to kind of solve that. On my part of it, I work with EFT and helping people to calm their anxiety and stress. Also, every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on Zoom. We don't do it live. We do a tapping session to help kind of clear the mind, get yourself in a better place. And you have to register, not register, you have to basically go to focusedhealthyfamily.com/EFT-group, where you can get the link to get onto the Zoom information. So that's every Tuesday night. Also, you can check out, we're on Facebook at Focus Healthy Family. We're on Instagram at Focus Healthy Family 1. We're also on YouTube, where you can see our podcast live that we do live at Focused Healthy Family. You can check out all of this stuff and more at our website, focusedhealthyfamily.com. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours. Thanks.